Treehousers! Happy Monday. Welcome to another week. If you are like me and your days are starting to run together, today is Monday, June 8th, and we're now into summer. I don't know how many of you are like me. It's sunny outside for me, and it's like 91 degrees outside, so it's real hot up here in my office. But I hope you all are doing well. I hope you all are staying safe. Um, Today we're going to jump into our home automation project. So even if you don't know Python, feel free to just hang out, relax with us, and just enjoy talking about code and just hanging out talking about Google Calendar today. And we're going to get to it. So we've been working on this home automation app for quite a while now. We finished up last week our weather. My mind totally blanked right there. We finished up the weather portion of our app. So our weather portion is also an API connection, which we're doing again today, just to a different place. We connected to an API, which is where we said, hey, we want weather for this city, this state, and for, I think, this many times. I think we've specified that. And then it sends us back the information that we want, and we got that all squared away. So I'll click over here to our weather so we can just give it one more look over and just see all the hard work that we put together 2 weeks ago doing our weather portion. So ta-da! So today we're going to be working on the Google Calendar portion. And before I do that, I wanted to remind you all that we made these kind of Trello board commitments for different things. And so I haven't been remembering to go back in to do it. Totally my own fault. But I wanted to remind you all of what we created. So we created these little kind of like user stories about the different features that we are putting in our home automation app. So the first one that we were working on was this was the weather feature. So we can check off that we added a connection to the weather API and we got the necessary weather info that we needed. That's all done. So we're going to work on the displaying of all the information, the front end of all of this, all at the same time. So we're working just on the back end, getting that all built, and then we're going to work on the front end. That's my preferred method of working on it. Other people might do, work on the back end of the weather portion and then go do the front end and then, do the back end of the next feature and then go do the front end and back and forth. I like to do all back end and get that finished and then go front end and do all front end and get that finished. But I just wanted to make sure I shared this. So I'm going to move that back over here to do because that's not what we're working on today. And I'm going to bring over here. And so for our calendar of events, we need to see what events are coming up so that we can start our day off prepared. So we're going to add a connection to Google Calendar. We're going to get the events for the day, and we're going to display the events to the user, which again, this step we're going to do later. So we're really only focusing on these two. And when I was doing my research on working with Google Calendar, what's going to happen is we're not going to get specifically the events for today. We're going to get the next 2 events that are upcoming. So if I had 2 events happening today, it would show me those 2 events. If I have 2 events happening way out in like August, it's going to show me those because those are the next 2 events. So that's how it's going to work right now. So the first thing that we need to do when working with the Google Calendar API is Google Calendar API. It's a great way to find where the Google developers' information is, and I just wanted to show how easy it was to find it. Google Calendar API, it's the very first link that's up there. So you're going to go ahead and give that a click. And then, yep, we want the Calendar API, so I'm going to click Calendar API. And then we're going to come down here to where it says Python. So we got Python, and then it walks you through exactly what we need to do today all on this page. So it's really nice. It's super helpful. And we're going to do it together as much as we can because with all APIs, like we talked about in our last couple weeks, You always get your credentials or your secret key, your API key, and that information you do not want to share with anyone else but yourself. So when it comes to that part, I'm going to tell you what you should do, but I can't show you. And I'm going to cough real quick, so give me a quick second. Okay, sorry about that. Anytime I start talking, my throat just like, and then it just goes downhill from there. So I'm going to try my best not to cough. I promise it's just because when I talk a bunch, my throat just like does not enjoy it. Okay, so on the Python Quickstart, we're going to scroll down and it's going to tell you what you need in order to have this happen. So you need Python 2.6 or greater, which if you've been following along with me, you should have Python 3 already installed, so that's not a problem. Pip already installed because we've been using it to install requests that we installed last time. And then you will need a Google account that has Google Calendar, because the way this works is you are connecting your own calendar and getting an authorization for this app you're making to connect to your own calendar. So if you don't have a Google account, it's free. You can use it just to practice this API, and Google has a ton of other APIs. They're really great to practice with because they do have amazing, nope, wrong direction. I'm trying to do it the way that it's pointing. Amazing, beautiful, as you can see here, documentation. And so it makes it really easy to walk through it and get things working. Sorry, I'm probably gonna leave my water right here just because I'm gonna have to take so many drinks. It's hot and my throat's a little dry from talking a bunch today. Okay, so the first thing is we need to turn on the Google Calendar API, and it has this nice big blue button. So you're gonna click it, and it's gonna ask you what you're making. Desktop app is fine. You're gonna hit create, and then you're going to choose. You want to make sure you're logged in with the account you want to, the account whose calendar you want to access. So you're going to hit create, and then from there, it's going to make sure that you have the right account, and then it's going to give you your credentials. So I can't go further than here because I don't want to show you my credentials on accident. But after you do create and you make sure you have the right account, up here in the top corner, it will tell you download. It'll give you an option to download, and that's what you'll want to do. You'll want to download your credentials, and it'll come in the form of a credentials.json file. And so you'll place it into your folder where you're working, and then make sure I already have it added on my git ignore, but make sure you add it there so that you do not share it with the world, and then you should be good to go. So I'll walk through that again just to make sure. So we did Google Calendar API. We just Googled Google Calendar API. You click on it and it'll give you a nice little link here, which takes you to the documents. And you want to go to the quick start for Python because that's the language we're using. Once you're here, if you've been following along, you already have the prerequisites except maybe this last one. So if you need to create a Google account, it should be super quick to do it. And you can just Google create Google account. Then you want to click on the button to enable. Desktop app is fine. You can hit create and then make sure you choose the right account and then download your credentials, which the download button when I did this the other day was up here kind of towards the top left of this box. So when that's all finished, then we can move on to step 2. So I'll give a couple seconds for anyone that's following along to do those steps if you need to. And as always, you can always watch the video again later if you want to watch through and see everything happen and then go back and follow along. That way you can pause and slow down, speed up, all that jazz, make me louder or softer, all those things. Sometimes it helps. I like to do that sometimes. I'll watch a video and then I'll go back and I'll pause it and step through it. Okay, we feeling good? Ready for the next step? So next is we need to install the Google Client Library, and it gives us the exact console command that we need to type in. Now, because we're using pip environment, so that we install everything into our nice little uh, pip file here, so that when somebody else decides to run your project, this pip file will be in your repo, and when they download it, they just run a special console code, and it downloads everything they need to. And it keeps our computer a little bit cleaner. So it's a long way of saying instead of pip, we need to make sure we do pip env, when we type this in. And when I did this earlier, in case you're following along at home and it's giving you an error, when I did this yesterday, this upgrade, dash dash upgrade here, was causing it to not work for me. When I removed it and I just did pip environment install and then copied all of that stuff, it worked fine. So give it a try with both. If it's not working for you, then try removing this upgrade. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try it with upgrade. We'll see what happens. Pip NV space, paste all that. Yep, see, it's giving me this error. It doesn't like the upgrade, so that's totally fine. I'm going to come back here and just copy everything but upgrade. And then I'm going to do pip nv install and then what I copied. Let me, whoop, there we go, scoop that up a little bit. So pip nv install, if I spell it correctly. I've been using my Mac all day. I keep wanting to do Alt V instead of Control V. Control V, there we go. Enter. And away it goes. So it took a little bit yesterday when I was doing it, so we'll just hang out here while it's installing. How's your day going? Hopefully it's going well. It's been hot for me. It's like 91 degrees outside. I think I said that earlier, but it's pretty toasty. My poor pepperoni, my poor dog, is she wants to go outside, but she goes outside for about 5 minutes and she's like, it's too hot. She comes back in. So she's like a little puddle downstairs in the cool air, and she's just laying in front of the window looking at the outside. I tried to get her to come up again so I could show her off again today, but it's a little too warm up here for her, so no Jethro today. But anyways, we got it installed. You can see we got a bunch of succeeded. It installed a bunch of stuff for us, and you can see our pip file is updated and our pip lock is updated. So if I come over here and move this out of the way, you can see our Google stuff, our Google packages are all here. So yay, done. So now that we installed, let's go back over to our Google Calendar API, and we're going to look at step 3. So we're just following the exact steps that they have here on Google Calendar API. On step 3, it's asking you to create a file named quickstart.py. You don't have to name your file this way. I just copied the code and then I ran it in my G-Calendar file and it worked fine. So you don't have to name a file this. But this is essentially, they're giving us the code that's going to do exactly what we need. So you can either copy this way, or you can also, they have a nice little handy dandy copy code sample button in the corner. Super handy dandy. And so I'm going to come in here into our G-Calendar file. I'm just going to paste. So everything's in here. Scroll all the way up so you can see. We have everything that's copied over from our step 3. And so essentially, step 4 is to just run the sample, and it will, it's going to open up a tab in your browser, just like any time that you're signing up for something and it gives you the option to sign up with Google, and it pops up that little box that says, you know, which Google account do you want to use. Sometimes it makes you type in then your Google account password, and then it signs you up for that service or logs you in if that's what you use. So it's that same box that's going to pop up. So that's what we're going to see. So to walk you through what this code is doing, because there is a lot here. So we'll come down here into the main. And so it gives you some really great, my mind is totally blanking on the word, comments here. These are a special kind of comment. My mind is totally blanking on what they're called. But they help tell you what this function does, and then it has really great comments throughout this code. So it's really helpful. So this is just showing, of course, the basic usage of the Google Calendar API, and it's going to pick the next 10 events, which we only need 2. So I'm going to go ahead and switch this to 2, because we only need 2. I'm going to keep scrolling. If you notice me scroll the opposite direction on accident, Mac is the opposite in it. when I use one and then use the other, I always do everything wrong for the first like 5-10 minutes. So this is essentially checking for a token.pickle. And what's going to happen is it's going to pop up that Google login so that it can make sure this app is logging into your account and you want to give it access. It's doing that process. And then it's going to save in this folder here a token.pickle file. So essentially it's going to say if that pickle file is here, then you're already signed in. If it's not here, then we need to do the sign-in process. So when we run it, you'll see what I mean by that process more clearly, but that's essentially what this section of code is telling us. It's telling us that it's going to check if that file's here. If not, it's going to make us sign in. Then we scroll down a bit, and down here is where the call to the API is happening and where it's printing. So it's using a now from datetime, and it's going to print the upcoming. And again, we don't need 10, we only need 2, so I'm going to switch this to 2. And you can see max results where this 10 is. We're also going to switch that to 2 because that's obviously the max number of results it's going to send us. So we only need 2, so our max results can be 2. Just makes it easier so we don't have to deal with 10 and then try and get just the first 2. If we only need 2, let's just get 2. So it's going to get the upcoming 2 events, and then it's going to have this variable where it's going to hold our 2 events, our events result, and then it already breaks down our events from this events result variable, so it's doing all that work for us. If you remember from weather last time, if I go to our weather, if I scroll down, remember we had to get to our results, and then we had to go into list, and then within list we had to dig down into like temp and main and all these different dictionaries and things. So it's doing that work for us that we had to do last time. Then it's saying if there are no events, then it's just saying no upcoming events found. And then if there are, then it's going to go for event in our events. So for each event in our events, it's going to get a start date, and it's going to print start and the event summary. So let's run it. And then, of course, we have our done main statement that's allowing us to run this file. So we're going to run it, and we're going to see what happens. I wanted to kind of walk through it a little bit, but the more that we play around with it, it'll also help to describe what the code's doing. So, there we go. Trying to get this so that it's above my face. So remember, when we're doing pip environment, we need to do pip nv run Python, and we want make sure I'm spelling it right, calendar.py. Okay, and that's going to run our Google Calendar. And you see that bubble up there? I forgot to save, so let's do that first. Save. Control S or Command S will save your file when you're in Visual Studio Code. So let's hit run. All right, so it's going to pop up. So you see it popped up. If you didn't see it, it was blinking down here in the bottom. I can't really point. Oh, I'm trying to point in the right direction. So over here in the bottom in the taskbar, it was blinking. So that's something to keep an eye out for. Sometimes it'll pop up the website and like come over the top of your code, so it's very obvious. And sometimes it'll open it up and it'll just kind of like flash Google Chrome down here. So just something to think about it. So I want my personal one. And it's going to say, this is what happened last time. And I was like, oh no, it's not going to work. I went and I clicked advanced because I made it, so I know it's okay. And then it says go to Quickstart, and it says unsafe. So it's just giving you a warning because obviously it's very smart of Google to do. If you don't know what this app is and you're going to attach it to your personal account, it could, of course, take information from you that's not safe. Um, but we are following Google's code from Google itself, and you can see it even has the lock symbol because it's verified. Um, so it's absolutely safe. It's just going to grab those first two. So this is, if it pops up and it scares you and you don't want to continue, I totally understand. But I promise that it's just letting you know that you're connecting an app to your personal information, and it just wants to be very clear that that's happening. So I'm going to click that yes, it's okay in that bottom corner, and it wants to view my calendars, which is totally fine. We're going to hit allow, allow, and it's going to call it Quick Start because that's the same name that it had here. Even if your file isn't named Quick Start, that's what it's going to call it. So then it tells us that the authentication flow is completed and we can close this window, so we don't need it anymore. We have an extra one too, so I'll get rid of that. So then if I come back over here, we have 2 upcoming events on my personal calendar, and that is on the 23rd is my dad's birthday, and then on April 30th of next year, you see I don't use my personal calendar very often, is my brother's birthday. So 2 birthdays. So it worked. We got the 2 upcoming events. So far, so good. So one thing that we need to do is we don't want to print this information to the console, right? I'm going to use it somewhere else so that I can display it. So one, I need to get that working because I don't need it to print. I need it to be returned instead. And then the other thing is this calendar ID up here. You can see it says primary. That is your primary calendar. When you open up Google Calendar, that's the one that you start off with. You can always add other calendars, but there's always your primary main calendar. So that works, but the calendar I want to use is a shared calendar. So I need to get my calendar ID so it's connecting to the calendar that I want. So let's do that first. So come over here to a new tab. I'm going to come to my calendar. I have no events, and so the calendar I want is called Amendola calendar. So this is my shared calendar with my husband. So we're going to do options for Amendola calendar. So when you hover over the calendar over here on the right side, and let me see, can I zoom in? There we go. Make it a little bit bigger for everyone. So over here, we have our 3 buttons. You can click on that, and you're going to go to settings and sharing. So on settings and sharing, I'm not going to take us there because this is going to be secret codes, but you're going to want to come down to integrate calendar. Oh, you can't see it. Oop, I don't want to scroll here. Let me scroll there. There we go. Integrate calendar. So when you click on that, it's going to have a title, kind of like where it says calendar settings up here. It's going to have a title that says calendar ID, which is exactly what we're looking for. If you remember from here, calendar ID primary. So it's going to be a calendar ID. Now it's not going to look like what we have going on here. It's not going to be a word. It's going to be like a set of numbers and letters mixed together. So I'm going to add that to my keys file, and I'm going to import. So let me go ahead and from keys import cal. I'm just going to call it cal key. So it's going to probably tell me it can't find that because it doesn't exist yet. But that's what I'm going to do. So again, on our integrate calendar, it'll have a little heading that says calendar ID, and I'm going to grab the calendar ID from there, put it in my keys.py file, and then we should be good to go. And I'm going to update some few things. So I can't do that with y'all watching. So I'm going to hide this screen for right now. And I'm going to do that right now while we're talking. So I'm going to go into my keys file. I type on cal underscore key equals, and it will need to be a string, so make sure you use your quotation marks. Go down to my integrate calendar, calendar ID. So it's a bunch of letters and numbers, and then it has like an at Google, at calendar.google.com at the end. Make sure I close that. Paste that, save my keys file, close that, and then instead of primary, this is going to be cal key. Okay, let me turn this back on. There we go. Okay, so you can see I have this equals the variable cal key now because that's saved in my keys.py file, which is my special code just for my shared calendar. And so if this is like, wow, you're going way too far, I got lost, totally leave this as your, as your primary, if I can spell it right, as your primary, the way it came, and that's just going to work with your primary calendar. I'm just trying to get it to work with the specific calendar that I want, but for following along, you don't need to create a specific calendar. But I wanted to let you all know how you can create or how you can connect to a special shared calendar if you want. So that's all working now, and to make sure it is working, we are going to run our Google Calendar, our G-Calendar file again. Oops. Must occur at the beginning of the file. Oh, it's getting mad. That is not at the beginning of the file. Let me switch this because it was working fine until that was there. So let me try switching that real quick. Cool. Ta-da! Now it worked. Okay. So then, and now you can see I have two different events that popped up because I'm on a different calendar. So makes it easier to tell that something different's happening. So I have my birthday, which is this weekend, and then we have two nephews. They aren't twins. They're from either side of our family. So my brother and then my husband's brother, their kids, born on the exact same day. What are the odds of that? So makes it really easy for us aunts and uncles to remember to get them birthday presents because their birthdays are on the same day. But those are the upcoming two events that I have on my shared calendar that you can see when I ran my primary calendar earlier. I had two different events because different calendar. So that is working. So one thing done. Now we just need to rearrange the code in a way that I can send or return the information so that I can display it. So right now it's just printing to the screen, which is awesome for testing. So I know it's connecting, I know that it's getting to events, and I know that it's working. So all that stuff is awesome. If you have been following and you've gotten that to work too, amazing job. So now we just need to switch around our code a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it similar to what we did with our weather.py. You scroll up, how we made it a class. So I'm going to keep that same theme going just to make our code look similar across our app. To me, I feel like that makes sense. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to leave scopes. I'm going to do class. Let me make sure. Let me check my... Did I leave scopes out? I did not. I put it in. Okay. Checking myself. So we have class, and I called it G calendar, and typing on this thing is making me nuts. I keep wanting to hit the caps button instead of the letter A. So we got our G calendar. I'm going to need our init method. Init, which is going to take self, not elf, self. There we go. And I think that's it. Yeah. Yep. I don't have any other arguments that need to be sent in. So inside here, we're going to have information for two events, right? And I want to send back or return to our overall app those two events so I can display them. So I am going to do self.event1. I'm going to make it a dictionary. This is because I can do key value pairs. Instead of just a list of things, I feel like key value pairs make it a little bit easier when somebody else is reading through the code to know, instead of like a list where you use numbers to access items, when using a dictionary, you use words. And so I think that's makes it a little bit easier when other people are going to possibly be running my code. So that's why I did a dictionary. And then you probably guessed it, event 2, so 1 and 2. So we got 2 dictionaries to start with. So from there, I'm going to put all of the code that Google has given me that gets the connection established into its own function. So I'm going to kind of pack it all into a function. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to tab, nope, just one. And we're going to call it, what did I call it? gcal connect, gcal underscore connect. And because it's a function inside of a class, it always gets self. So it's always going to get information from the instance. And now I'm going to highlight, I'm going to scroll all the way down, and I'm just going to do all of it right now. I'm just going to hit tab. Let me make sure. So you can see that's in line. I'm going, this needs to go over one more, and this function is actually getting removed. I could actually cut this and paste it underneath because the function's still doing essentially the same thing. Okay. So all I did was remove the def.main. So we can come down here because this no longer exists. That function's gone. We can delete that for now. Actually, I'll leave a space because we'll need that. So now all of this is inside of this gcal connect function. So it's going to run relatively the same. Don't worry, we're going to break it up a little bit more. I'll scroll down and see where I split it. Okay, so I'm going to leave everything that's here because this is all that deals with the connection that's happening, making sure that you're signed in and all that jazz. So I'm going to come down here, and it's going to I'm going to split off down here. So if there's no events, instead of printing, and I can actually remove this print statement too before I forget, because remember, we don't need anything to print to the console because the person viewing our app won't see the console. They're just going to see the app. So unless you want to keep messages there for your own purposes, like if you want to make sure this is still working and have it keep printing to the console, that's totally fine. I do that too sometimes. It just like makes you feel good that you know it's still working when it prints messages sometimes. Totally understand it. You can leave it if you want to. I'm going to remove it because I don't feel like I need it right now. This print statement, we need to switch it. And what did I do? I just returned a string. So I did return no upcoming events found. So when we get into the app portion of this and using it, this will come more into play, displaying no upcoming events. But for right now, that's all we're going to do to use it. So you can see I need to scroll back up. You can see where this green and yellow are. So green means I'm underneath this function. Yellow means I'm underneath this class. This is an extension that I'm using on Visual Studio. So I want to create a new function, so I need to come back out so that I only have the yellow next to me. So I'm going to come back here. Actually, I'm going to do this. There we go. Create a space. So I'm going to create a function, and this is going to deal with the data. So the first one deals with the connection. The second function is dealing with the data. To me, that seems to make sense for breaking it up into functions. To somebody else, that might not make sense, and you might want to break it up in a different way or keep it all in the same function. totally up to you. I'm just showing you one way of doing it because there are, trust me, thousands of ways to deal with different code challenges and code problems. So I have set data is what I call this. We're going to take self, and here's where we're going to take an argument. We're going to take events because we have events up here, this variable, which is housing my list of events. So I'm going to take that data and I'm going to do this, turn it into a function by adding that colon. So I left this in here. So we should still get the same print statements that we did before. So just to check, make sure our code's still working after we made changes. I'm going to run it again, and it should still print out these birthday events that are coming up. So up arrow on the keyboard brings up your last command. Enter runs it. Oh, line 67. Oh, that's of course right. We're not calling anything, so our function's not going to run. That would be a problem. So we need to call our G calendar. And actually, before we go to one thing, I'm never calling this function, so that's not going to run either. So if there's no events, we want it to return no upcoming events found. Else we want to, and we don't need to put it in an else statement, but this is essentially like an else. We need to call this set data function, and then we need to send in the events. Make sure, yep. I'm going to add a return statement there too, because we want to keep passing it back up the chain. So actually I don't need to. We'll add that in a second because we have our print statement here, so it's going to print our information. Okay, so now we can come down here, make sure we're tabbed in, so we're inside of this if statement. We're going to do cal equals G calendar, and then we're going to do cal dot G cal connect. Okay, so what this means is I have a variable that's holding an instance of our, oops, all the way up, of our Google Calendar class. So it's holding one instance of this class. And then using that instance, I can call Google Calendar Connect, which is one of the methods of this class. So it's going to call this, which is what's connecting us to our Google Calendar API, connecting to my calendar. And then inside of this function, it's calling self set data and passing in events. So it's calling this function, passing in events, which is still printing out our 2 events. So hopefully you're following along. I know that's a lot of info and it can be super confusing, but it helps to build it, to hear it, you know, kind of all the things, right? You see it, you hear it, you touch it by coding it yourself, and all that helps to solidify the information. So let's try giving that a run now that we fixed those things. Ta-da! Cool. So it's working. Okay. So we know that it's all working, and we need to change this print statement to something that's not print, because we need to send back our 2 events. So I want to send back our 2 events. We could right now, we could just return these 2 events, right? We don't necessarily have to mess with the data. We could just return our 2 events, and then in app.py later, I could mess around with the data. So first, let's do this. Let's print the event so we can see what that whole piece of information looks like. So you can see what I mean about having to kind of set or kind of clean, organize, more organizing than cleaning the data. So let's run it again. There we go. So this is all the information that it's sending me. It's quite a lot. And it tells you who creates it. It tells you a bunch of information. and hit clear. So you can see right now we only need the summary, and this right here is getting our start date for us. So it's sending us a ton of info, so that's why I want to kind of clean it up. So let's see. Trying to remember how I did it. Okay. So for event in events, I popped in here and I'm going to scoot my code that I'm copying from myself a little bit closer. So in here, if there's not a self.event1, that means in our self.event, if I scroll all the way back up to the top, if this is still empty, then I want to put data in it, is essentially what I'm doing. So if it's empty, let's put stuff in it, is what I'm doing right now. So if there's not information in it, let's put some info in it. So then we're going to do self.event1, and we're going to add a key here of summary. And you can guess that we're going to make it this, event.summary. And then we're going to come up here to do self.event1. And our next one's going to be the start. So we're just going to take this, Control C, Control V. And so now our event dictionary has a summary, which contains the event summary, and a start, which contains the start date. And then I did have in my design the location. I had like a map if there's a location. But not all of these events have locations, so we'll need to do an if statement to see if there is a location, add it. If not, then you just leave it blank. So if location is in our event dot keys. So if that's one of our key value pairs is location, that means this event has a location. So then we can give our self.event a location. And it's going to equal event location. Cool. So if it doesn't, it's just going to skip over this completely. So I'm going to go ahead and delete both of these. Come back over. And so this is where, copy this, because now we need to do the same thing but with our second event. And so whenever you copy code, most of the time it means that you need to think about it some more, and there's a way to do it. Right now I'm breaking it up so that it's a lot easier to see the different steps and pieces that I'm doing. Later when we work on refactoring, we can look at a way to make this so I'm not copy pasting, but just so y'all know, that's why I'm doing it right now. So we need to change this to event 2, and event 2. So save. Cool. So that sets our two event dictionary variables with the right info. So now I'm going to make sure I'm outside of this for loop because I don't want this to happen over and over again. I'm going to return self.event1 and self.event2. I'm going to save it. So this just means that when this set data function is done and it's put all the info into these two events, it's going to return them, which brings it back up here to this function. So we will need to return it here, which then kind of passes it back up the tree. So what that means is if I come down here to our Google Calendar, now I would need to hit print, because there's no print statements anymore, so now I need to print this function call, and it should print out our 2 events. Okay. Cool. So we have the first one, which is my birthday, starts then. The second one is Parker and Ethan's birthday, which is on the 21st of August. So, yay! So that's all working. So that is our Google Calendar connection. It's a lot easier than the weather connection. Thank you, Google, for giving us the Quickstart code, because that's what makes this a lot faster to interact with. So there are other ways that you can interact with the Google Calendar API. For what we need it to do, this is all we need to do. We just needed to get those 2 events, kind of set the data up to be returned, so that when we get into our app.py, we will be able to display those 2 events. So let me close our terminal. I'm going to scroll back up here, and I'm going to just run through what we've got one more time. So I don't need any of that anymore, because we finished our to-dos. So we have all of our imports. The only one we added was this, so that we could have our, I'm going to cough real so that we could have access to our calendar ID key. So we have our class, which is Google Calendar. We have 2 variables in here. We have an event and an event 2. So those are created whenever we create an instance of this Google Calendar class. We took pretty much all of the info that Google's Quickstart function gave us, and we stuck it into this Google Calendar Connect function, which checks for so you can see my token.pickle is here. So I'm already logged in. It checks for that file. If it's not there, logs you in. If not, then if it's not there, it will make you log in. If it is there, it knows you're already logged in, that this app is good to access your calendar. We're going to keep coming down. Then it goes into the API now that we're logged in, and it grabs our events for us, calls our set data function, which is going to save both of our events as different, save both of our events into their own dictionaries, so that we have the summary, we have the start, and we have the location information for each. And all of that will return our event information so that we can use it in our app. So I know when it gets into working with some of this stuff, it can get a little confusing. I am still new to Python. Python's a newer language for me, so playing around with this stuff and interacting with APIs and just getting my hands dirty, getting in there, really helps to solidify my own knowledge of Python. So I highly recommend jumping in to, the Weather API, Google Calendar API. There's also APIs for Google Maps and some of their other products. So jump in there. Don't be afraid to jump in there, play around with it. Try to do different things. Try just printing the information to start, and then try interacting with the data. There's some really great ways to get in there and to start figuring out what it is you do know and what things you don't know. Because that's one thing I find when I work on these projects is I get into it and I realize I don't know how to do that. And so I jump into Google. I'm Google searching. I review courses on Treehouse. Until I ask questions and until I figure out my answer, and then I figured that one out and I move on, and then all of a sudden I hit something else. I'm like, I don't know how to fix this. Back to Google. So it's part of the process to continuously learn and to continuously try, and you won't know what things you don't know until you start jumping into the code. So to me, that's the easiest way to realize what information you really understand and what information you really don't understand. Because that's at least how it works for me. When I jump into actual coding, actual projects, then I start realizing, wow, I really get how to do this. And then I jump into something else. I'm like, I did not get how to do that at all. I need to go review, rewatch some videos, read up some more on it, ask some questions, and then start practicing. So this is our Google Calendar connection. A lot easier thanks to Google than the weather. So it's all done this week. So next week, we are going to jump into, I think, the to-dos, because the grocery part of our app takes a little bit more than the to-dos do. So I think doing to-dos first and then groceries second would make sense. So kind of to do the easier version first and then do grocery.py second. I believe I'm going to use Django, and we're going to put this up on the web. For my use, I'm going to use it in a different way, but for everyone to follow along, it just makes it easier if we do something up on the web so that we can all see it and interact with it, and it makes it a little bit easier for everyone. So I actually don't know Django yet, so next week's going to be fun. I'm going to learn Django, or not next week, in 2 weeks. So I'm going to learn Django in the next, couple weeks, and we're going to put stuff together and get it working. And if we mess up, we mess up. We Google some stuff, ask some questions, and we'll figure it out together. So should be fun. I hope you all have enjoyed working on this project. We're ending a little early today, just because this one was a little bit easier. But I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay safe out there. If you're like me, I feel like everyone suffers from imposter syndrome, which is essentially feeling like you don't fit in, right? Like you're a new developer and it's like, I don't have as much knowledge. I feel like my questions come across as like silly, and you just don't feel like you're meant to be here. And trust me, you are. Everyone can learn to code. It takes time, it takes dedication, just like anything else that we really want to learn. And there is a brand new course out there today that Michelle put together that's all about imposter syndrome on our Treehouse website. So if you haven't seen it, go give it a look. If you would like to see it, go hang out at teamtreehouse.com. I highly recommend it. It's something that everyone suffers from. I promise you, everyone has had touches of imposter syndrome at least once in their life. And so I wanted to recommend it because it just came out today. Essentially, like right before we went live, the course came out. So I wanted to make sure I announced that for you all too. But that's it for me today. Like I said, we'll work on the to-dos. We'll work on that next week. That'll have to do with databases, because we need to save this information somewhere, save our to-dos somewhere. So we're going to work with the CRUD information, which is creating to-dos, reading them, updating them, and deleting them. So we're going to work with that next week. Or not next week, I keep saying next week. In 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, we'll be working on that. Most likely with Django, but be prepared in case it's not Django next week. But I'll be walking you all through the process anyway, so we'll do it together. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy summer, hopefully, or I guess for some of us it's summer, for some of us it's the start of winter. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you stay safe, and feel free to join us in our live streams. It's just a nice time to relax, hang out with other coders and developers and designers, and learn something new. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. See you all later. Bye!